Hey, welcome back to the Fantasy Ball Profits. My name is Rob Skudovic. Thanks for joining me today. Christian's not here. He's off at college, although he'll be doing some videos out there. He's going to be doing a daily fantasy video next week. Keep an eye open for that. Give us your feedback. Tell us what you would like to see in that. And Ryan's not here now, but he'll join us for our start sit video on Tuesday. Thank you guys for watching, subscribing, things like that. Now, the first week of football is basically over. It's Sunday night. We haven't had the Monday games yet, but it's exciting to have football back. My Vikings won. That's exciting. And my fantasy team did well. I've got about 10 games in play right now, and I'm going to finish like 9-0 or 8-1, something like that, 9 or 10 games. With that said, things can change quickly. You can have a good week, you can have a good team, and all it takes is a couple of injuries. Thank God my guys didn't get injured week 1, but I've seen things turn around that quickly. So here's our waiver wire video for week 2. Now, maybe you're looking at the waiver wire video because maybe you had injuries or you had ineffective play, or maybe you just want to build out your bench. And that's one of the things that we tell you all the time. Don't make the mistake of standing pat on your bench. Teams will do that. They'll draft, they'll have good starters, and then they'll wait. Maybe they start 2-0, 3-1, things like that, and they feel good. You can never have enough talent on your bench, so always look to upgrade to improve in that area. Now, another thing that we want to share with you before we actually get into the video is that last year we had some people ask us, like, a lot of the players you mentioned aren't like 90 to 95% available on my league. They might not be out there. You're mentioning players that may be 25 to 30% available. Why do you do that? Well, here's why we do that. Every once in a while, we will give you a player that's readily available, maybe 90, 95% available out there. But usually, if a player is widely available, there's a reason for it. And though it's fun to talk about a sleeper or stretch out there or reach for a guy that maybe nobody else thinks of, honestly, if we're being real right now, that a lot of times you're gambling on players like that, yeah, he might have some potential, yeah, he might be a sleeper, but the likelihood that you can trust him is a lot lower. There's a reason why he's out there. So we rather do is we're going to give you 5 or 6 players at each position that are 20 to 30% available oftentimes, and that between one of them, you can find one of those guys that's going to be on your waiver wire that you can use, that you can trust, and that's somebody that we feel confident giving you names out there. So that's kind of why we do it that way. Now, the other thing that we want to tell you out there is you have to take this information and you need to contextualize it for your league. We talk about these players, we talk about scoring systems, where they rank, but there's so many variables that we can't take into account for your league, your scoring system, your league size, your bench depth, things like that. So you're going to have to take this and you're going to have to flex that into your league a little bit. Now, before we actually get into the video, we don't have to worry about bye weeks that haven't happened yet, but some injuries out there are happening already. We see Goodwin left today with a quad injury. Bell holdout. We'll see how that plays itself out. It's interesting right now. Le'Veon Bell held out. Connor had a huge week 1, and I think some of you owning Connor out there are hoping and praying that Bell stays out a couple more weeks. So we'll see how that plays out and how that affects them. I actually have Bell in a couple leagues, and I backed him up. I handcuffed him with Connor, and I'm not really sure how that's going to play out. I'd love to see Bell return at this point, but I'd love to see Connor maybe go another week or 2 there. Leonard Fournette left with a leg strain today. Now, the coach came out and said that he feels good about the injury. It doesn't seem like it's severe, but Leonard Fournette once again has a history of health issues. He can't stay healthy, and so that's a concern. And then Greg Olsen, recovering from that foot surgery in the offseason. He left today. He was on crutches, and he was in a walking boot for the surgically repaired foot of his. So that's a real concern out there. You got Doug Baldwin, we know, leading up all preseason. He talked about being about 80, 85% there because he had a knee issue. Well, today he left the game with a knee issue, so that's a concern. Jeremy Hill also left today's game with a knee injury, and he actually was looking good. I think he had 4 carries for like 26 yards, and then he left the knee injury. Marcus Mariota today exited. Playing against the Dolphins with an elbow injury, and even before he got injured, he'd struggled there. The offense was struggling quite a bit. And then Delaney Walker had kind of a gruesome ankle injury, and I don't know exactly what that's going to be at this point, but it looks like it's going to be one he's going to miss a lot of time at this point. So those are some injuries out there, some things, some concerns that we have. Of course, Monday morning you hear a lot more. We'll get reports back from team and camps, etc. So let's get right into the waiver wire video, and I like to start with the running backs, then we'll move to quarterbacks, so on and so forth. Now, the first guy I want to talk to you about their running backs is James Conner. Now, the running back for Pittsburgh is not readily available. He's only 15% available out there. There's a low likelihood he's actually in your league on the waiver wire. Currently had a monster day today and get 136 yards rushing, 2 TDs. He had some catches that look really good. But here's want to speak to that situation a little bit here. If you're a Le'Veon Bell owner, and I am actually in a couple leagues, I have one in a dynasty league. It really behoove you at this point, if you're in a dynasty league especially, if you have Le'Veon Bell, to either pick this guy up if he happens to be out there, he's probably not, or trade for this guy. Now, if you're in a dynasty league, I think you have to begin to rethink about Bell and Conner and what the Steelers are going to do there. Steelers, the way they've approached this contract situation with Bell has made it very clear to a lot of people that they're going to move on from him in the offseason. James Conner's performance today is going to only strengthen that conviction that they can move on and he could become their running back one moving forward for the next few years. He had a great game today. And so maybe he's out there. If you got Le'Veon Bell, you need to pick this guy up. If not, you may want to think about making a trade and handcuffing the two together. I think at this point going forward, that situation is going to be interesting. In fact, I would say if Le'Veon Bell reports Monday to camp, and I don't know if he's going to, but if he does, I still think James Conner gets start week 2. So I want to talk about TJ Yeldon. Is a guy out there that you need to consider. He's 87% available. Fournette, we talked about how he left the game with a leg injury, a quad injury, and he's had a history of staying healthy. And now the coach did come out and say he feels good about the leg injury. He thinks he's going to be fine. But Yeldon is a guy that can be very effective today in the game as he filled in for Fournette. He had 3 catches for 18 yards. 14 rushes for 51 yards and a TD. You look at Yeldon is actually very effective in the passing game. If you look at the last couple of years, his catches per game, and if you extrapolate that over 16 games, last couple of years, he's averaging about 50 catches per season. Very good there. So if Fournette misses any time, this is a guy that you need to have. If you're a Leonard Fournette owner out there, you definitely need to handcuff Yeldon at this point. Another guy I want to talk about out there is Nyheim Hines of Indianapolis. He's 95% available out there. Now Wilkins started today. He really struggled to run the ball. I don't think Mack, when he comes back, is going to do much better. That O-line is not very good at run blocking. So I think this is an offense here because of the bad offensive line in terms of run blocking and a bad defense. They're going to have to throw the ball a lot today. And I think that's going to increase his value in PPR leagues only. Once again, hear me when I say this, in PPR leagues. Today, Hines, he had 5 carries, 19 yards, but he had 7 catches for 33 yards. I believe he had 10 targets, so he was very active in the passing game. So if your bench is weak and you're in a deeper league, he's a guy that you could stash. I wouldn't do anything with him yet. I would stash and I just watch and see how that develops, but he's a guy that could definitely have long-term value in PPR leagues that are deeper. Now another one out there, and I think people are going to overreact on this guy, and I think you definitely need to look him. Phillip Lindsay, the running back of Denver. I know he made a lot of noise in the preseason. They talked about how good he looked. This is a guy that's 98% available in leagues. Today he had 15 carries for 71 yards. He had 2 catches, 31 yards, and he also had a touchdown today. Now last year, Tariq Cohen did a similar thing. He came out week 1, week 2. He was huge. Everybody loved this guy, got excited. And we cautioned people. We said, okay, be careful there. Jordan Howard's going to be the lead back. He's going to get a majority of the carries. Well, we're going to say the same thing with Lindsay here. Lindsay, very much like Cohen, is a smaller back. Now, he's not as small as Cohen per se, but his size is going to limit his ceiling. I think he's around 190 pounds. It's hard as a 190-pound running back in the NFL to take that punishment week in and week out. This guy's value, because he's small and explosive, is really to get him out in space to be used in the passing game. He's not going to unseat Freeman as the lead back there. In fact, today they split carries. They both had 15 carries for 71 yards exactly. But here's a guy, though, I think that is going to have PPR value in those leagues. So he's a guy you definitely need to keep an eye on. You definitely could draft him, or you could pick him up in the waiver wire and stash him. I'm not sure I'd be comfortable starting him next week. I want to see a little bit more. And once again, in standard leagues, I wouldn't consider starting this guy yet. 2 of the guys I want to talk about out there is Chris Thompson and Adrian Peterson, both running backs for Washington. So Thompson is 22% available in leagues, and this week he plays Indianapolis. An Indianapolis defense that was sliced by the Bengals and Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon looked really good today. How much was that Joe Mixon? How much was Indy's defense? I guess we'll wait and see. I think it's a little bit of both at this point. Now, Chris Thompson, I wouldn't trust him from week to week unless you're in a PPR scoring league. I want to say that very clearly. Now, he had a very nice week today. This guy is fully recovered from injury, nothing to worry about there. He had 5 carries for 65 yards and 6 catches, 63 yards, and a TD. And that's kind of what you're going to see with this guy. He's going to get probably 10 to 12, maybe 13 touches per game. They're going to get carries and targets. Very similar to last year, but he was on pace before his injury to be in the top 12 for PPR running back scoring, so he was tracking really well there. He's a guy that if you are in PPR leagues, you definitely need to pick him up. And then there's Adrian Peterson. Adrian's only 14% available, so it's unlikely he's out there. Now today he had 26 carries for 96 yards and a touchdown at 3.7 yards per carry. And that's what I think you can kind of expect from him this year. No, this guy's got great cuts, great vision still. He's doing a lot out there, but he's definitely a guy that you can tell doesn't have the speed that he once had. And so he's a guy that you definitely need to look at because he's currently the running back out there for him. So keep an eye on Adrian. Another guy out there that you want to take a look at is Matt Breida, who's 42% available. Now today, he had 11 carries for 46 yards, and he had 1 catch. Now he goes from playing the Minnesota defense, which is very good, to playing Detroit, so that's going to help probably help a little bit alleviate some of that pressure. Now the concern I have for Matt Breida at this point is I see him and Morris really kind of split and carries down the middle. In fact, when it's all said and done, I expect that Alfred Morris is going to get more carries for him, and the reason why, he's just a bigger, more physical back, and Matt Bright is small, another guy that I mentioned in other videos, only 190 some pounds. So I think that's going to happen. Now today, what happened in the game is they fell behind by a couple touchdowns, and then San Francisco was forced to throw the ball. They had to get away from the run, and Alfred Morris. So I look at Bright as a guy that's a running back 3 in PPR leagues that are deep, but he is 42% available out there. Another guy out there that you need to look at is Peyton Barber at 21% available. He had a nice day today going. The first half, he had 50 yards rushing in the first half of the game. Now, he only finished with 19 carries for 69 yards. His yards per carry started off great, I think, in the 5s at one point, and then it dropped down to, I think it was somewhere in the upper 3s, something like that. But I think what happened in that game is, if you look at game flow, the Bucs got a 24-point lead, and then things switched at that point. They had a huge lead over the Saints, and they really looked to run the clock, run the clock out. So they started to run the clock, and they became predictable, and they saw a lot of loaded boxes at that point. You could see his yards per carry drop, but he was very effective. He looked good in there. And this is an offense that I think is going to continue to click. I think it's going to do it often because there's a lot of solid weapons there. You look at Evans, Jackson, Godwin, Howard, Brate, and as they continue to click, those lanes are going to begin to open up. And so he's a guy that is currently the uncontested starter there. Jones was a healthy scratch today, so you need to take a look at Peyton Barber if he's available in your league. 21% available out there. I would pick up a guy like him, Peyton Barber. Another guy out there is Isaiah Crowell. He plays Monday, so we know how he's going to do. But he's a guy that we've told you from time to time. I believe he's going to have over 1,000 yards rushing. He's going to be the lead back there. I know Paul, some people are excited on Paul, but I think Paul is going to be a third down back in the passing game, maybe resting. But I think you're going to see Isaiah Crowell have a huge role in that offense, and he's 24% available out there. Another guy out there that's readily available is LeGarrette Blount, 59% available. Probably not going to be used in the passing game very much. May not even break 1,000 rushing yards, but I could see easily 900 yards rushing and maybe 8 to 10 touchdowns. He's going to be the guy that's going to get the carries in the goal line there in the red zone. And then another guy out there that had a big day today is Austin Eckler. He's 84% available, and he had a big game today. He had 5 carries, 39 yards, and 5 catches for 87 yards and a touchdown. He looked great. He looked explosive. He looked good last year. This is a guy that's very talented. Now, the problem with him is that Gordon looked very good today too. He was very effective in the running game and in the passing game. So I look at Austin Eckler as really handcuffed to Gordon. If you have him, I would encourage you to handcuff him. Or he's a guy that could be a running back 3 or flex play if you're in large leagues. So that's some of the guys you should consider. And then the other thing I want to mention out there, now it's way too early at this point, but eventually some of you teams out there are going to get eliminated from contention. It's going to become clear if you start 1-4, maybe 2-5. It's going to become pretty clear that you're probably not going to make the postseason. If that's you and you're in a dynasty league, you could begin to look at the waiver wire to build to next year. You can think about like Darius Geis as a guy that you could pick up for next year, or you can think about Donta Foreman, or even Robert Turbin in Indianapolis, who's on a 4-game suspension. So just something to keep in the back of your mind. Hopefully you're not going to be out of it. Hopefully you won't be eliminated from contention. But if that becomes you, you can begin to use a waiver wire to build the next season. So let's move on to our next position. So let's take a look at the quarterback position. Maybe you're in a league where you have to have 2 quarterbacks started, or maybe you're a guy who waited to take your quarterback inside to stream. I'm a guy I actually did that one league. I'm going to stream quarterbacks from week to week. I've got my eye on Jameis Winston out there after week 3, or maybe you had some injuries at quarterback, whatever it is. Maybe you have Marcus Mariota that you would depend on, although I would imagine that most of you didn't. Anyways, we'll look at some quarterbacks out there that you consider. First guy we'll look at is Alex Smith. Alex Smith is 38% available out there. He had a nice week 1, 255 yards passing and 2 TDs. And really, if you watch that game, Washington kind of let off the gas in the second half there. They were at a 21-point lead. Now he goes and he plays Indy this week, who made Dalton look like an all-pro quarterback. And so he's got a great matchup there. He's got a lot of weapons around him. He seems like he's very comfortable in that offense. Alex Smith, 38% available in leagues. Another guy out there is Case Keenum. Case Keenum is 75% available. He had another nice game today, like some of the guys we're about to mention. 329 yards passing and 3 TDs. Now the downside of it is he also had 3 interceptions. Now he has a nice matchup versus Oakland. And now Oakland's defense was not a good defense before they traded Mack. And now they traded away Khalil Mack. That defense is going to have a lot of struggles this year. I like Case Keenum and the fact that he's got Demaryius Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders, Lindsey, Freeman. He's got very good weapons around him. So he's got a nice matchup next week. Case Keenum, 75% available. Now the guy out there is Mitch Trubisky. Now, he's 82% available. Now, first half of this game, he looked great tonight against the Packers. He struggled a little bit the second half. I think he's got some maturity that's got to take place, some things they need to work out there in that offense. But he did look better than last year. And he plays Seattle, a defense that's really a shadow of its previous self. So you look at that Seattle defense, they were picked apart by Case Keenum, like we had mentioned, for 329 yards. So Mitch Trubisky's a guy that maybe you could roll the dice with. Then another guy out there is Tyrod Taylor. So Tyrod Taylor is 88% available. Now he plays the Saints defense that was exposed badly by Fitzpatrick. The veteran's just filling in until Winston comes off suspension, right? And he goes in there, puts up 48 points, 417 passing yards, and 4 TD passes. Now, Taylor against the Steelers today, Tyrod Taylor, he struggled early on in that game, but he finished a very nice fantasy line. Maybe not a great quarterback numbers, but great fantasy numbers anyways. He had 197 yards and a passing touchdown, but he was huge in the running game. He had 4 carries, 77 yards, and a TD. Now, I think another thing that's going to bode well for Tyrod Taylor is you look at Josh Gordon. They limited his snap count in this game. He missed some time with injury. He missed some camp time. He was out of shape, things like that. But today he had a nice, beautiful touchdown grab. He showed great hands, great footwork on it. It reminds us why Josh Gordon could be so huge this year if he can stay out of trouble and stay on the field. Well, Josh Gordon in week 2, his role should be increased. He'll be in better shape, working through that injury. So an increased role for Josh Gordon against that defense makes Tyrod Taylor a nice play. He's 88% available out there in leagues. Another guy out there is Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco is 93% available. Joe Flacco looked really good after a couple seasons where he has really struggled and his job was at risk. He looked good in the preseason, and he continued that today against the Buffalo Bills. Now he's added some new weapons there. You got Crabtree, Andrews, Brown, Snead. Today he goes for 236 yards and 3 TDs. And if you consider those numbers, those were impressive because in the second half it was mostly Lamar Jackson in there. So once again, he looked good, and now he faces Cincinnati Bengals, who gave up some yardage and some points to Andrew Luck there. So we like that matchup. Now for some of you out there, I think Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to be tempting. But I'm going to caution you to stay away from him this week. He's widely available, we know that, but he faces a Philadelphia defense that is really good, and a Philadelphia defense that made Matt Ryan look very average last week. And so I would look elsewhere if you need to find an option there at quarterback. Let's take a look at some wide receivers that may be available that can help your team out there. The first guy I want to look at is Kenny Stills, 29% available out there in leagues. Now, he is the team's #1 wide receiver. Now, you got Danny Amendola on there, who's a slot receiver, but he has a very limited ceiling. Then you look at Devontae Parker. That guy's value has been sinking very fast. He's had injuries. Other preseason, they talked about his potential, what he could do. It didn't pan out. This preseason has been the very opposite. They talked about how he's been getting lockdown in coverage. He can't get open, can't get separation. So right now, he is the #1 wideout, Kenny Stills. He goes out there today, and he had a great game. 4 catches, 106 yards, and 2 TDs. He's still young at 26 years old, so Kenny Stills for Miami. You got to take a look at him. Then there's Randall Cobb. Randall Cobb is 33% available in all leagues out there. And he had some really nice catches today. Tonight he goes out for 9 catches, 142 yards and a TD. In fact, he's probably the reason why I'm going to win one of my games, or that late touchdown again was huge for me. They used him a lot of different ways out there in the field. They got him the ball quite a bit. Now, Christian actually covered him quite a bit over the summer. A number of videos. We kept telling you over and over, don't overlook this guy. He's going to be huge in that offense, and he had a huge night tonight. So Randall Cobb, 33% available in leagues. Mike Williams. 40% available. Second-year wide receiver for San Diego. Now, San Diego started slow today, but as the game went on, he looked better and better as the game went on. He looked more comfortable, and Philip Rivers started looking his way more often. He finished with 5 catches for 81 yards. He's a former first-round pick who has great size and skills. He's a guy that you definitely need to have on your bench, especially if you're in a dynasty league out there. Now, 2 other guys I want to talk about is John Brown and Willie Snead, playing for Baltimore Ravens, the first year there. Now, one of the problems is that offense looked great, and these guys had decent numbers. That offense for the Ravens had many possessions because the Buffalo offense was terrible. And I think we look at this offense for the Ravens, and we can assume they're not going to be a prolific offense. I think they're going to ultimately win a lot of games playing defense, running the ball, etc. But John Brown is 80% available out there. Today he has 3 catches, 44 yards, and a TD. The Ravens actually talked him up a lot in preseason, said how good he looked, how it looked like he was healthy and fast again. He's actually a wide receiver who's had some success in the league. The problem is he's had a very hard time staying healthy. But here's my concern with Brown and Snead is I really want to see more of these guys. I want to see target distribution. I want to see exactly what the role is going to look like in a game where they're not blowing the other team out by 40-some points. Because you also got Brown there, you got Snead, Crabtree, etc. So that's a lot of targets to go around. A lot of people, I should say, that are going to share those targets. Then Willie Snead's another guy who's 98% available. He had another good game today, 4 catches, 49 yards, and a touchdown. My concerns for Snead are the same as Brown. Potentially these guys could shake out and have some value, but right now I still want to see exactly how the targets go there. So another guy out there is Cole Beasley today. 7 catches, 73 yards. He's 92% available in leagues out there. That Cowboys offense struggled a lot today. You look at Allen Hurns, had 1 catch. It wasn't pretty. So Cole Beasley really became like a safety valve for him out there, a guy that he was checking out with short catches. Now, if you look at Cole Beasley, he's going to ride hot or cold throughout the year. He'll disappear for some games and have some good games. He does have value in PPR leagues that are deeper, but that's it. I would stay away in standard leagues. Now, very similar to Cole Beasley, another guy out there is Ryan Grant, 97% available wide receiver for Indy. Now, you look at Indianapolis, after T.Y. Hilton, they don't really have a solid or very good number 2 wide receiver. So I think he's a guy that's going to get a lot of targets and catches this year. Today, he had 8 catches, 59 yards. He's another guy just like Cole Beasley, really only has value in PPR leagues as a wide receiver 3 in very deep leagues in the right matchups. But he's definitely somebody that some of you will need to take a look at out there. Another one I want to talk about is Chris Godwin. 70% available today. He goes out. He has 3 catches, 41 yards, and a TD. 2 of his catches were nice. They were amazing catches. And we actually talked him up quite a bit leading up to the start of this season. I think this guy's got a lot of long-term value. I think in the second half of the year, this guy's going to take over as number 2 wide receiver there. The concern I have with Chris Godwin right now, there's a lot of weapons, a lot of mouths to feed in that offense. But I definitely think he's a guy that you need to stash on your bench out there. Another one I'll look at is Philip Dorsett. Philip Dorsett, wide receiver of New England. 97% available. He had a very productive day. On 7 targets, he had 7 catches, 66 yards, and a TD. Now, if you watched our videos, if you've listened to us at all, we haven't pushed Hogan that hard. I'm not a huge Hogan fan. He'll have some good games. In fact, recently, one of you asked us about a trade, and we actually kind of advised you to trade him away. We said Hogan really doesn't have a ton of value, especially after week 4, and so I'll go ahead and make that trade. Now, you look at Dorsett today. Gronkowski had a great game. After Gronkowski, he was really the best guy in the passing game there. Now, the downside of Dorsett is that there's a lot of mouths to feed. New England loves to spread the ball around, love use different packages, players, things like that. And so that hurts a little bit. And of course, Julian Edelman will be back after week 4. So I think that tells us that Philip Dorsett's going to have a very limited use in there. Yes, he'll have some value in fantasy, especially the next 3 weeks. He can have some value there, but long term, probably not. Another guy out there to probably be hot on the waiver wire, but I'm not quite as excited about that, and that's Deshaun Jackson. Deshaun Jackson is 75% available. Now, he's currently in concussion protocol. He left the game with concussion, so we'll have to see how that plays out this week. Now, he did have 5 catches on 5 targets for 146 yards and 2 TDs. Concern I have for him is there's so many weapons there. You got Godwin, you got Evans, you've got 2 good tight ends. So from week to week, what is he going to see in terms of targets? Like today was very productive. 5 targets, 5 catches, 146 yards, and 2 TDs. But he's somebody you need to stash and take a look at. Another one out there is Ted Ginn. Ted Ginn, wide receiver for the Saints, 84% available. So he finishes today with 5 catches, 68 yards, and a touchdown. Now, all preseason, the Saints have talked up Tre'Quan Smith. And we think when it's all said and done, Tre'Quan Smith will overtake Ginn as the number 2 wide receiver on that team. But concerns the coach had talked about, coaching staff had talked about Smith having a hard time learning the playbook. And so I think early in the season, probably the first maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks, I think Ted Ginn is going to see a lot of time in the field as Tre'Quan Smith gets familiar and comfortable with the playbook there, blocking schemes, things like that, audibles, etc. And so early on, I think the first 3 to 4 weeks, Ted Ginn will have value, but eventually that'll flip and Tre'Quan Smith will have a much bigger role. Another guy out there is Dante Pettis. The rookie wide receiver for San Francisco is 99% available today. He had 2 catches, 61 yards, and a TD. His value is solely connected to Goodwin, who heard that he had a leg injury today, a quad injury, so we'll see how that plays out. If Goodwin misses any time at all, Marquise Goodwin misses any time, then I think Pettis is a guy that you could take a look at there. Another guy out there is Sterling Shepard, 22% available today. He goes out, he has 5 catches, 48 yards against a very tough Jags defense. He's a very good number 2 wide receiver who's going to have much better matchups coming up in the next few weeks. He's a guy that you definitely need to have on your bench. And there's Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett's 49% available. He didn't have a great day today, but he did find pay dirt. He had 3 catches, 59 yards, and a TD. If Baldwin misses any time, and I think he's probably going to that knee was an issue, he left today. I think they're probably going to sit him for a few weeks. That means Tyler Lockett becomes the number 1 wide receiver in that offense there. So I would definitely take a look at him. Another guy to look at if Baldwin misses any time is Brandon Marshall. Brandon Marshall is 94% available out there. He had 3 catches, 46 yards, and a TD. Another one out there is Geronimo Allison, wide receiver at Green Bay, 89% available. Had a nice game today. Concern I have for him, he's the number 3 wideout. You're going to, of course, you look at Cobb and Adams, they're going to get a majority of those targets there, but he's definitely a guy that's a good stash. A couple other quick hitters out there is Nelson Aguilar, Probably not available in your league, only 13% available. Jeffrey out last week. They used him in a lot of different ways. He ran the ball, he completed a pass, and had 8 catches on 10 targets, so he was used quite a bit. Another guy out there is Julian Edelman. Once again, he still has 3 more weeks of suspension, but at some point, if he's available, currently he's 16% available, you might want to pick him up. So those are some wide receivers that you should consider. Let's get to our tight ends. So the first tight end I want to talk about is Antonio Gates. Now, I actually didn't bring him up because I think you should pick him up. In fact, the very opposite. He left. I think not San Diego, I get all mixed up now, but the Chargers brought him back because they're looking for somebody to fill that position. And I know we love Antonio Gates, Hall of Fame tight end, who's had a great career, and people are getting enamored with his name. But I think he's a guy that you need to stay away from. He's older now. He can't get down the field. He's got good hands. He's got a big body, so he's going to have catches. He has value in the red zone, but beyond that, he's not very effective. Stay away from Antonio Gates. Once again, I know that he's back on the scene there. People think, okay, he's back with Rivers. He's going to have a huge year. Stay away from Antonio Gates. Once again, great player, but he's at the downside of his career. A guy out there is kind of interesting. I don't know how to take an account out there, but one tight end to look at is Will Disley. I don't even know how to say his name because I've never heard this guy really except for a little bit going into this weekend. That's a tight end for Seattle. He's 99% available out there. He's a 4th round pick. Now, he was drafted and brought in. A lot of people thought that he was brought in to be a pass blocking tight end. But today he goes out there, has a huge game, 3 catches, 105 yards, and a TD on 5 targets. He was actually fairly active in the passing game. And with Baldwin going down, he's a guy that I think could have value. Now, here's where I kind of land with this guy. Certainly got my attention. That tight end position, that job is open there. If somebody can take a hold of it, maybe he's the guy. I wouldn't pick this guy up and trust to start him next week, but he's definitely a guy you need to keep your eye on. He needs to be on your radar. If you're on a lot of sites out there, you have like a watch list you can click on. I'd put him on your watch list. Just keep an eye on this guy and see how it progresses. Also, love to hear from the coaching staff, their take on his game and how they plan on using him moving forward. So we'll talk about him later in the week. Is he somebody to consider? But right now, he's somebody to keep an eye on. Definitely not somebody you could trust. Another guy out there I think is a serious consideration is Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews, tight end of Baltimore, is 99% available. He ended up with 3 catches, 31 yards. He looked really good. He would actually had better numbers, but in the second half, they didn't throw the ball much because they're destroying the Bills. He's another one that I wouldn't fully trust yet, but I think you need to keep an eye on Mark Andrews. There's some talk that this guy could really be an impact player there for them. Another guy out there is Eric Ebron, 68% available. Now, people forget that Eric Ebron was a former 1st-round pick who came out of college, highly touted tight end with a lot of offensive skills. Played for Detroit, didn't have a great career. Signed with the Colts in the offseason. He had a nice game today. He had 4 catches, 51 yards, and a TD. Andrew Luck loves to target his tight end, so that bodes well. From the downside of it, you have Doyle there. Doyle also had a good game. So I think that both of those guys, Doyle and Ebron, devalue each other. But if either one of those guys were to go down and it left one tight end, that tight end would right away be considered in the top maybe 10 to 12 tight ends in terms of weekly starts there. Another one out there, not highly available, you need to look at is George Kittle, 26% available in leagues. Today he was Jimmy Garoppolo's best weapon and receiver out there. He had 5 catches, 90 yards. He looked really good. He's a guy that's out there. Another one out there to consider if you're really desperate, Tyler Eifert. 35% available. He didn't have a big day today, but he's always been a guy that's had a nose for the red zone. He's got some talent. He's had a problem staying healthy, but he looked healthy today, so you can keep an eye on him. And then Jesse James, I want to talk about him a little bit. He's 96% available. He had 3 catches, 60 yards. And I think a lot of people might think he has some value. The concern I have with it is just too many weapons are for Pittsburgh. Okay, you look at Bell when he comes back, you've got Connor, you've got Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, Washington. So from week to week, you might have some good numbers, but overall, I don't think he's a guy that you can trust. Let's get to our kickers and our defense. So we kind of put these together now. We're going to talk about some defense. And normally at this point, I looked at matchups, availability, and we talk about defenses that are streaming defenses. Guys that weren't good enough to consider week to week. Defenses that are not good enough to consider every week, but maybe defenses that you could pick up for a week and then drop, kind of playing that matchup game. But there's a defense out there right now that's 52% available. I think you need to pick up and plan to use the rest of the year, and that's Chicago Bears. Chicago Bears are 52% available. They're going to be a very good defense. They look good tonight in the first half against Green Bay. Now, of course, end up losing that game. Aaron Rodgers came back, won the game for him. But you can just tell that that's a defense that's got some talented players there. They got some young players that are going to get better as the year goes on. Floyd, I believe, is out of that game. Whenever he's on the field, when Mac is in playing shape, when he understands the playbook there and everything, that is a defense that's going to be difficult to deal with down the road. And so you need to pick Chicago up, not because of a matchup this week, because they're a defense that I believe from this point moving forward is going to be one that you consider starting week to week. They are 52% available out there, Chicago Bears. Some kickers out there. Look at Aldrick Rosas, kicker for the Giants. He had 3 field goals this weekend, playing against a very tough Jags defense. I think that offense is going to move the ball well and be productive this year. It's going to create a lot of kicking opportunities. Now, here's a guy last year that struggled quite a bit in this preseason, though. He shows he has a strong leg, hit some long field goals, and he was consistent. Keep an eye on him. And then another kicker out there to consider is Brandon McManus, the kicker for the Broncos. He's 85% available. He booted some long field goals today. This week coming up, he's playing Oakland, and he kicks for a solid offense. And this week they're playing in Denver, which is always nice when they kick in thin air, because always you're going to see at least 1 or 2 50-yard field goals in that game. So those are some waiver wire considerations for you guys out there. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, once again, let us know. We'll put out some videos later in the week. We'll update you with more information. Things come in, injury reports, whatnot, or after Monday night's game, we'll have new information. Once again, that is our week 2 waiver wire video. God bless.